Hi, friends. It is Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, the 22nd of April. I hope you'll do something today to honor our Earth. Maybe plant something or make a plan to plant something. We've ordered some trees from the Arbor Day Foundation that we'll be planting and various things like that. Pick up a little bit on single-use, getting rid of single-use plastic use in your life, those kinds of things. Yesterday I did a little prep from Reynolds Price Books, Three Gospels. Reynolds Price's book, Three Gospels, where he talks about Mark and John, but then at the end of the book, he talks about teaching this class at Duke University, where he was an English professor, and teaching about these Gospels, and then having the students write term papers, putting the things in terms of literary understanding together, the sequences in Jesus' life and things like that. He talked about the Christmas story and how we've conflagrated that story from Matthew and Luke to be one story now. What would we do? So he has talked about the fascinating term papers he got with this exercise, having young people walk in with an open mind in reading these and learning new things. This is the last part of the introduction before I read you Reynolds Price's rendition of writing the gospel, his own gospel, based on his understanding of biblical translation. Where I rearrange the order of incidents in Mark, or rarely, where I invent a piece of bridge work between incidents, moving Jesus from place to place in Palestine, say, or linking separate acts in what seem possible ways, or implying certain evolutions through time and Jesus' own sense of his nature and his meaning, I do so in the manner sketched by my originals in the few moments when they enter Jesus' mind. So what he's saying here is mostly he follows the order of Mark's gospel in his own writing of his gospel. They proceed with sober speculation and a minimum of narrative embroidery. In other words, he's not filling in the incidents with other things, the order of incidents. Faced with imposing memories that may often have reached the canonical writers devoid of geographical or chronological context, those writers built the same homes they could manage with such detached timbers, and I do not hope to better the poetic fidelity of their well-informed inventions. When I imagine the conception and birth of Jesus, for instance, and when I set three invented speeches into the mouths of his family and pupils, Joseph at the birth, Peter at the transfiguration, Mary of Magdala at the tomb, each invention is set in italics. I do so with guidance from those few apocryphal stories which seem profound in their guesswork, or, just conceivably, some scrap of tradition which may have reached them. My main hints come from the impressive first-person nativity speech of Joseph and the geography of the birth, both contained in the 2nd century proto-gospel of James, which is a non-canonical book. Non-canonical means not in the canon of the Bible, but written in the same time. I rely on the reader's native wit to note that in places my history is metaphoric. The solemn dance and the song in which Jesus leads his pupils after the Last Supper come directly from the Acts of John, a 2nd century narrative of real fascination. I likewise add the odd, reliable-sounding detail from other early sources. From Justin Martyr in the mid-2nd century, for instance, I take the detail of a fire in the Jordan at Jesus' baptism. I note Paul's claim in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, that the risen Jesus appeared to James, who was Jesus' brother. And from Paul's claim that Jesus appeared also to the 12, I deduce an appearance to Judas, his traitor. An occasional speech of Jesus derives from the impressive and quite early Gospel of Thomas, discovered whole in the Egyptian desert as recently as 1945. And from scattered other early sources, I employ a few sayings that ring true. I've invented no single important saying from whole cloth. From other early accounts that may well preserve fact, I suggest that Jesus in his early manhood had worked at the blacksmith's forge, and that Zebedee's son John sold fish to the high priest in Jerusalem. And when a modern archaeological finding has seemed relevant, or a topographical or climatic observation from my own 2 visits of Israel, I have included it. Throughout, I emulate the original first-century Greek in avoiding punctuation except where confusion might result. It is a virtue of such clean prose to keep a reader watchful and to drive off the inattentive. My hope is that a discerning reader will recognize and register my few inventions as careful meditations on a quantity of bedrock history that exceeds the facts we possess for any other ancient life whose force survives in our civilization. We, after all, know as much or more of the life of Jesus of Nazareth as we know of such clamorous lives as Ramses II's, Alexander's the Great's, or even Augustus Caesar's. And we maim our good luck in having so much and our common sense engaging its worth when we fail to grant the wealth of our sources. As Mark, John, Matthew, and Luke all transform speech and act into story with the purpose of discovering both the path of a life and that life's meaning, so my own mosaic finds a figure deep in its surface. That figure is, of course, shaped and colored by my own predilections, as Schweitzer showed the hero of most 19th century lives of Jesus to be the Jesus wanted or needed by their individual authors. But a brief summary will, I hope, show my bias as sane, at least, and justified by the ancient evidence. I've represented fairly, I hope, even those strands of Jesus' teaching which condemn important parts of my own life. But I trust that no reader will conclude that I have any pretensions for my work other than a lifelong concern with the material, a keen seriousness of purpose, and a sense of the unparalleled value of the life described. Any thought of creating a new text for dogmatic scrutiny or for anyone to lean on as the primary source of personal enlightenment is far from my intention. My version of the life and meaning has a spine like this, and this is in italics. In the reign of the Roman Emperor Augustus, a young man named Jesus, intended by God as his son, grows up obscurely in a village in northern Palestine. From early years, he ponders the aim of his life and then confirms his sense of unique sonship in the revelatory moment of his baptism by John, a desert prophet. Jesus ratifies that sonship to his own amazement and doubt in a crowded tour of teaching and healing through the towns and farms of his home district, Galilee. That early teaching declares that coming reign of God on earth. That early teaching declares the coming reign of God on earth, and the necessity that people must turn in preparation from their accustomed ways. Jesus' apparent doubts of his own mission and of the nature of his coming reign are resolved and profoundly altered when he learns, in a moment of inexplicable explanation or exaltation on the heights of Mount Hermon, that his fated mission is the largest in history, the blood redemption of humankind from its willful fall into self and greed. Confirmed in in his surety of purpose. Jesus then transcends with his baffled pupils to Jerusalem, challenges both the temple authorities and the Roman overlords. And after an hour of terrible fear and doubt in Gethsemane, he dies at his enemies' joined hands, is buried late on a Friday afternoon, and rises bodily from the dead 2 mornings later. In uncanny but convincing appearances, he rallies his frightened and scattered pupils for a campaign of mercy, warning, and hope to all human creatures, a campaign that continues today. So that's what he would write on his cover about what he's about to share with you. He goes out of italics, off the spine, into his own words again. The evidence seems to me to permit that one legible pattern among almost innumerable others, the sight of a single human life, lived nearer to the Maker's mind than any other life yet heard of, west of the Jordan River at least, and through all Western history till now. My simplest hope here is to have clarified from the earliest witnesses one at least of the credible shapes of that life as it cuts its lines on the eyes and minds of men and women no more receptive or retentive than ourselves, yet who nonetheless brought him onward through time. As large a gift as words have to give us, and as heavy a freight. So tomorrow, I will begin reading an honest account of a memorable life, an apocryphal gospel by Reynolds Price, about the life of Jesus Christ, as he would put it together from all these sources. So I think that is a fascinating thing that we might be looking at for the next few days as we gather together in our small, what has now become a rather small little group of you who is tuning in. And so let's close with prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I hope you will join me tomorrow for Reynolds Price's apocryphal gospel of one memorable person, namely Jesus.